Hi, I'm Patrick Boylan from Roma Tre University in Rome, Italy, and I'll be talking about learning languages as culture critically through ethnographic interviewing Saturday at 4 p.m. That's at the end, the very end of a long day of presentations and discussions, the end of 3 long days of presentations and discussions. And so by 4 p.m. on Saturday, you'll probably be all numb. And so I'm making this video for 2 reasons. The first is to reassure you that I won't be giving a formal lecture. You probably couldn't take another one. But rather, I'll be chatting, such as I'm doing now, to explain something about the course that I wrote for the European Union Project Picture to teach students, L2 students, how to interview native speakers of the language they're studying ethnographically. That is, in order to understand their culture, their mindset, so as to be able to internalize it. The module is in English because it was tested on Italian ESL students, but the structure can be adapted to any language to teach students of any language how to interview native speakers of their L2. So that's the first thing I want to do with this introductory video, to reassure you that on Saturday at 4 p.m. You'll probably feel the need to unwind and not hear another lecture. Well, stop by, we'll unwind together looking over this course. The second thing I wanted to do was to define the concepts behind the course, which come down to the key words you see here in boldface. There are 7, and you may already share my definitions of these words, but I'd like to define them now so that you can see if we're on the same page. The first word we define is English, since this is a course for teaching English to ESL students, although, as I said, it can be adapted to other languages. So what do we mean by English? Well, how do we define that word? Well, according to the dictionary, of course, English is the Western Germanic language, etc., etc. But what does English mean in a given social context? That's the question. And the answer is it doesn't mean one thing. It means many things. Let me give you an example. When I went to Italy in the 1970s, I applied to teach English at the university there. And the dean told me, no, I couldn't, because, you see, I didn't speak English. English was the language spoken in Britain. The British English was the only proper English, and I spoke some sort of inferior dialect, or so he said. Well, we discussed it at length, and he finally came to the conclusion that, well, I could teach a course, but with the condition that I taught British English. Well, I did for a month, and then passed on to teaching other varieties. The first course was called Varieties of English, so for 1 month of British English, and for 1 month of the other 7 months of the year, another variety. And the students could learn that the world of English was not just one thing, but many things, and they had a lot of possibilities of choice. They could choose the variety that best suited them for the future work, or the ones that they felt affinity towards. For example, some students were into reggae music and were happy to spend a month learning to talk like Bob Marley, learning Jamaican English. Some students were into rap and were happy to spend a month learning Black English, Black vernacular English, and so on. So the basic concept behind the word English in this course is that it is not one thing. It is a Métis family of idioms which are akin, but which have divergent wills to mean. When you speak British English, you have one will to mean, and when you speak Jamaican English or Black American vernacular, you have another will to mean, and that's what you have to find out by learning how to interview native speakers ethnographically. Learning. What does learning mean? Well, we take the definition of learning from a remark by Einstein that knowledge, real knowledge of reality, starts from experience and ends with it. It ends with experience. Everything else is just information. So that means that in this course, learning means verifying or disproving hypotheses about personal experiences. Students formulate a hypothesis about what it means to speak Black vernacular English. Well, they roam the streets of Rome to find Black American tourists and interview them to see if their hypotheses make sense. And but even a linguistic question, I don't give the answers as the teacher. I invite them to go out in the streets and interview people to see how they use a particular expression or verbal form, to see if it seems correct or not correct to them. So basically the course treats learning a language, learning a foreign language, as an experimental science. Language. What does language mean? Well, as you probably have seen up to now, that it certainly doesn't mean just lexis and syntax. Those are just the external parts of language, the outer shell, the skin of the fruit, so to say. But the pulp of the fruit, what's inside, is something else, and that's behavior. Language is fundamentally behavioral modulation of your whole being when you speak a language. It's language is embodied, so it's modulation of the psyche and the body, and due to a sedimentation of instances of willing to mean, which are idiosyncratic, but which are expressing at the same time a communal will to be or culture. That sedimentation produces a behavioral modulation that we call language, that is visible through words, yes, but not necessarily. It could also be through gestures, through silence. You can communicate through silence in a certain way, and typical of a given culture. But that's your language, because language is the will to mean in a certain way, coherent with a cultural will to be. Now, this may sound arcane, and it certainly is, but if you look at the handout that you'll be getting on Saturday, you will see some references to one or two articles that clear up the concept, so it will cease to be arcane. Ethnographic interviewing. Well, obviously, ethnographic interviewing means questioning natives to discover their cultural mindset, not to discover artifacts. Students don't go out to interview British tourists to see if they drink tea at 5 o'clock or tell time by looking at Big Ben. I mean, the usual things that they teach in so-called British culture courses. They go out to interview Brits to see what their particular forma mentis is that makes them speak and establish relationships in the way they do. So that's what ethnographic interviewing is. And the last word we have to define is teaching. What does teaching mean in the context of this course? Well, you're all teachers, so you probably have your own idea of what it means to teach. In the context of this course, teaching means getting out of the way and letting students learn. Now, that's not my definition. That's the definition that Maria Montessori, the great Italian educator, gave. But she said, you get out of the way and let students learn only after you have prepared the environment so that it contains everything necessary so they can learn on their own, and in a way that motivates them to learn on their own. That's the job of a teacher, preparing the environment. For example, in this course, we learn to get out of the way by using instruments like blended learning in a flipped classroom. If you're not familiar with these terms, they're in the handout too. As I said, there'll be a handout in which you can see what these expressions mean, or, well, the handout will have a video of the talk, slides used for the talk, the course itself, the materials used during the experiment at the University of Rome, plus the students' page, the class plans and the homework the students did, so you can see how they reacted to the course, and then the various references to other things like behavior, languages of behavioral modulation. That's all in the handout. So that's what I mean by these basic concepts, and I hope to be able to explain what the course is on Saturday, seeing you on Saturday evening at 4 p.m. And until then, ciao, ciao.